Yay! I have the keys to unlock Pocket Ronnie. Okay, today we're doing reciprocal trig functions. So your base trig functions are sine, cosine, and tangent. These are your fundamental ones that you will see on your calculator. And remember, we did the SOHCAHTOA to help you remember sine, cosine, tangent. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent is opposite over adjacent. There are, other than these three trig functions, there are three more. Each of these have a reciprocal to it. The reciprocal of sine is cosecant, the whole word cosecant. The reciprocal of cosine is secant, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. So, and just as we're saying, so if cosecant is a reciprocal of sine, then cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Secant is a reciprocal of cosine, which means it's hypotenuse over adjacent. Cotangent is a reciprocal of tangent, so therefore cotangent is adjacent over opposite. In reality, if you just know sine, cosine, and tangent, and you know which ones are the reciprocal, you don't have to memorize this part of it. You just need to know that sine and cosecant are reciprocals of each other, cosine and secant are reciprocals, and tangent and cotangent are reciprocals. These are easy to remember that there are reciprocals because cotangent has the word tangent in there. With sine and cosine, you just need to remember that the first letters do not go together. Like sine starts with S and secant starts with S, but those do not go together. They are not reciprocals. So the S and the C's go together and the S and the C's go together. So if you want to remember it that way. So sine is reciprocal, or cosecant is reciprocal of sine, secant is reciprocal of cosine, cotangent is reciprocal of tangent. Okay, so looking at 2A number 6, we have this triangle and we have theta here. It's a right triangle. Again, you can only use trig functions with right triangles. In the instructions, we need to find the missing side. Okay, then the instructions, once we have the missing side, we need to do all 6 trig ratios. Ratio is just a fancy word for fraction. We're going to do the 6 trig ratios in fraction form and in decimal form. In this particular problem, you can get rid of the decimal, but the way the book does it, they do not get rid of the decimal, so we're just going to leave the decimal. But the first thing you have to do is find the missing side. We need to know this leg. Well, it's a right triangle, so to find any missing sides of a right triangle, you always use Pythagorean Theorem. So, Pythagorean Theorem, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared, or a squared plus b squared equals c squared. One of my legs is 6.2. I don't know the other leg. Be sure and put everything in the right place. 14 is your hypotenuse. 14 is across from the right angle. The side across from the right angle is always the hypotenuse. So 6.2 squared is 38.44. We don't know the other leg. 14 squared, 196. We're solving for L, so we need to subtract 38.44 to both sides. So L squared equals 157.56. We're solving for L, so we take the square root of both sides. Square root is opposite of squaring. And then we're going to put all radicals into decimals to 2 decimal places. And so this is about 12.55. In the book, you might see symbols of 2 squigglies. That means approximately. So this leg is approximately 12.55. Now that we know that leg, we can do all 6 trig ratios. Okay, so first let's do sine, and we're doing sine of theta, which means I'm the little man standing right there. Sine theta is opposite over hypotenuse. So if I'm standing here, the side opposite of me is 12.55. So 12.55 over hypotenuse, which is 14. Okay. When they say to put the answer in fraction and in decimal form, this is fraction form. Yes, I have a decimal within the fraction. At this point, they're just going to leave it like that. Then when they want you to put it in decimal form, they want you to go ahead and divide this out. 12.55 divided by 14, because that's what this symbol means right there, divided by 14. It will be a decimal that is smaller than 1. All your trig ratios for sine and cosine, not necessarily for tangent, but for sine and cosine, your decimals, when you divide this out, should be smaller than 1. And when you put this into a decimal form, you need to put it to 4 decimal places. Trig ratios are usually to 4 decimal places. So that would be 0.8964. Okay, now let's do cosine theta. Cosine theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. If I'm standing here, the side adjacent to me is 6.2 over the hypotenuse, which is 14. So that's okay in fraction form, even though it has a decimal. But now they want it in decimal form, and so that means divide this out. 6.2 divided by 14 is 0.4429, rounding, because it was 285, but this is 5, so since it's 5 or higher, this gets rounded up to a 9. Trig ratios are always to 4 decimal places when you're putting it in decimal form. Okay, now we're going to do tangent theta. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. If I'm standing here, the side opposite of me, 12.55, over adjacent to me, 6.2. Let's divide that out. 12.55 divided by 6.2 is 2.0242. Do it to 4 decimal places, and tangent can be higher than 1, can be a decimal higher than 1. I'm going to divide that out again just to double check. Yeah. Okay, we've done 3 of the trig ratios. Now we need to do the other 3. The reciprocal of sine, cosine, and tangent. So the reciprocal of sine, I'm going to come over here. So the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So cosecant theta, I don't even need to memorize what it is. I know that cosecant is a reciprocal of sine, so work smarter, not harder. So cosecant's a reciprocal of sine, so I can look at this fraction and then take the reciprocal of it. So that would be 14 over 12.55. Then I can divide that out. So 14 divided by 12.55, and that is 1.1155. Okay, I'm going to give you another tip. If you have just done this one, if you've just done sine, and then you get this decimal, these decimals are also reciprocals of each other. So once you get this decimal in your calculator, the 0.8964, you can use your reciprocal button. The reciprocal button on your calculator is going to look like 1 over x, or x to the negative 1. So once you have this number in here, then you can use this reciprocal button, and then you'll get that, the reciprocal of this should be this answer right there. Yep, so I got the same thing. So your reciprocal button will look like this, or look like this on your calculator. Once you get this answer, you can then take the reciprocal, use the reciprocal button, and then you should get this decimal right there. Again, that's about working smarter, not harder. So the reciprocal of sine is secant. So then I can take the reciprocal of this fraction right there, 14 over 6.2. Either you can divide this out, or if you took this number and took the reciprocal of it, you'll get the same decimal. So I'm just going to do the 14 divided by 6.2 because I don't have this number in my calculator anymore. And that was 2.2581. Decimals for sine and cosine will always be a decimal below 1, which means that cosecant and secant will be a number greater than 1. Cotangent theta, reciprocal of tangent, so that would be 6.2 over 12.55. So dividing that out, .4940. And now we've done all 6 trig functions with a fraction. This one's a fraction form, and then this is the decimal form. Remember, decimals are always to 4 decimal places for trig functions. Alright, we're looking at 2B number 5, and again we're trying to find the missing side, and we're trying to find all 6 trig ratios in fraction and decimal form. So the very first thing we have to do, in order to do any trig ratio, you need to know every side of the triangle. So we need to find the hypotenuse, right triangle, Pythagorean Theorem. I would go ahead and find the hypotenuse with the radical. So you have 2 square root of 3 squared plus 11 squared. 2 square root of 3 squared means 2 square root of 3 times 2 square root of 3. 11 squared is 121. When you have this, numbers times numbers, radicals times radicals. 2 times 2, 4. Square root of 3 times square root of 3, square root of 9. I'm just writing each step for now. Eventually I'm going to skip some of these steps. This means 4 times square root of 9. Square root of 9 is 3. 4 times 3, 12. 12 plus 121, 133. But we're solving for h, so we need to take the square root. And then we're going to go ahead and put this into a decimal instead of leaving the radical. Since we're eventually turning this all into decimal form, we're just going to turn our radicals into decimals. So the square root of 133, h is approximately 11.53. So that's the hypotenuse, 11.53. And again, to work smarter, not harder, to make life easier, we're going to turn this into a decimal. So at this point of trig, you can turn majority of radicals into decimal. Sometimes answers are left in radical form, sometimes they're left in decimal form. In my classes, I usually let you know specifically when to leave it in radical form, when to leave it in decimal form. So we're going to turn this into a decimal. This means 2 times square root of 3. So do the square root of 3, then multiply that by 2, and that is approximately 3.46. Now we have all the sides of our triangle. Now we can do all 6 trig ratios. So sine theta, remember here's theta, you're the man standing at theta. Sine theta, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. You're standing here, the side opposite of you, 3.46. Hypotenuse, always the same, 11.53. Then we're going to turn this into a decimal. That's 4 decimal places. And that would be 0.3001231. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the reciprocal. Right now I have this in my calculator. So the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. So take the reciprocal of this fraction. So that would be 11.53 over 3.46. I still have this in my calculator, so I'm going to use my reciprocal button. So once this is in my calculator, I can use the reciprocal button and take the reciprocal of that number. And that is 3.3324. When I take the reciprocal of this, I got this, and that should be the same thing as this number divided by that number. I'm going to do 11.53 and divide it out just to prove it. And yes, I came up with the same thing, 3.3324. Now I'm going to do cosine. Cosine theta, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. If I'm standing here, the side adjacent to me is 11. Hypotenuse still 11.53, hypotenuse doesn't change. So 11 divided by 11.53, 0.9540. I'm going to go ahead and do the reciprocal of cosine. Reciprocal of cosine is secant. So since that's the reciprocal, I can take the reciprocal of that fraction. 11.53 over 11, which means I'm taking the reciprocal of that number. I already have this in my calculator, so now I'm using my reciprocal button, and that comes out to 1.0482. Tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. If I'm standing here, the side opposite of me, 3.46. The side adjacent to me was 11. Dividing that out, 0.3145. Just making sure I'm rounding correctly. Reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. Take the reciprocal of this fraction. You should also be able to take the reciprocal of this number. That's a decimal right there. Reciprocal of that is 3.1792. When I take the reciprocal of this decimal, I got this, which should be the same thing as this fraction divided out.